What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and in fantasy football, leagues can be lost in the early rounds and won in the late rounds. If you drafted or picked up off waivers guys like Raheem Mostert, Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua, you were probably set up in a really good spot to make the playoffs and maybe even win your league last year. But when we draft in these leagues and we get to rounds 10, 11, 12, the board can get weird. Your checklist might be not completely up to date. You might lose some players on your list and just kind of panic. And I don't want you guys to be in that spot. So today, I wanted to highlight my 10 must-draft sleepers for 2024. So these are just 10 guys going outside of the top 10 rounds in Sleeper ADP, Underdog ADP, and ESPN League that you can hone in and target when you get to the late rounds of your draft. As always, if you enjoy, make sure you get down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
VVS stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen, she gon' let me.
Now, this one is pretty gross. Our first player here is going to be Zeke Elliott. He is somehow going in the 10th round on Sleeper, 11th round on Underdog, and he is, at this point in time, the RB1 on a depth chart for a really good scoring offense. It has been a top 10 scoring offense each of the last 2 years. They have Dak Prescott in Dallas, and this year they are projected to be a top 10 offense again by Vegas projections. Now, they are also a team that, despite having Tony Pollard and a bad run game last year, still featured their running backs a ton. When we look at fantasy usage by team, this is a chart by Hayden Winks, shout out to Underdog Fantasy, of course. They had the 5th most usage going to their running backs last year, and usage is just your carries, your targets, your red zone opportunities, goal line looks, all of that. How many points should your running back room be scoring? And Dallas had a ton of points to go around last year. Now again, Zeke is currently the clubhouse leader to lead this backfield. They do, of course, have Rico Dowdle, but Zeke Elliott operates in the phases of the game that we want for fantasy football. We want touchdowns, and we want PPR points. And last year, Zeke Elliott saw more goal line opportunities than Ramondre Stevenson when they were both healthy weeks 1 through 12. Even though Stevenson was that dude for New England in 2022, Zeke still cut into his role. Now, Rico Dowdle is there, of course, but we've never seen him get a featured role in the NFL. And if you look back to his college days, this is a good tweet by Jacob Gibbs, Rico Dowdle's collegiate avoided tackle rate 17%, ranked 303rd out of 441 qualified running backs. And Isaiah Pacheco is the only running back with a lower rate who ever finished as a top 50 fantasy running back at the next level. Now, I'm not as low as Jacob is on Rico Dowdle, but it's worth mentioning. Now, of course, Zeke Elliott is also beloved in Dallas. He is, I don't know, probably like a future Ring of Honor guy there. And he is somebody last year who caught over 50 balls and was actually the RB12 in points per game from weeks 13 on after the Ramondre Stevenson injury. So he's somebody that's not super sexy, but if he gets the pass catching role as a really good pass blocker and he gets the goal line role in this offense, he could be this year's Gus Edwards, where he just scores a bunch of touchdowns and is a league winner in fantasy. Now, after that, our second must-draft sleeper is Jalen Polk. He is going in the 11th round on Underdog, 13th round on Sleeper, probably even later than that on ESPN, and you're going to see a lot of rookie wide receivers on this list. I truly do believe once you get to a certain point in the draft, I'm not looking for Josh Palmer or Rashid Shaheed or guys like that in terms of just like high floor, low ceiling wide receivers. They're just very rarely going to make my lineup. When the draft strategy video we put out on Friday, you guys saw I am targeting wide receivers early in my drafts. Those guys aren't going to make my lineup, but the guys who can are the rookies with huge, huge upside, right? And this is a really good graphic that still holds true for Michael Dubner and Jack Miller over at RotoVision Establish the Run. Pretty much as a whole, rookie wide receivers increase their points per game as the season goes on. Veterans decrease. We saw that last year with Rashee Rice, where he wasn't really startable through the first 10 weeks, and then he was really good in the back half. And then the opposite was true with Adam Thielen, where he was really good during the early season stretch, and then he tailed off. I want somebody that can be a league winner when the fantasy playoffs come around, and that's why I want to target rookie wide receivers like Jalen Polk. Now, he is on a New England team that's not all that pretty. We just talked about it with Zeke Elliott, but this should at least be a team with some upside there, right? We don't know if Drake May is good or not. There's some upside for this to be a kind of CJ Stroud ascension. I'm not saying that it's going to happen. I'm saying that that is the upside there, right? Same thing with like Jordan Love last year, where if we have a question mark at quarterback, that at least gives you an out for the passing offense to succeed, because what if that quarterback is really good? Now, Jalen Polk is in a wide receiver room with Demario Douglas, who's okay, Kendrick Bourne, who's like not great. He's coming off an ACL injury. You have Juju Smith-Schuster. A rookie I really like, but is probably too deep for a normal home league, would be Javon Baker. I'll put him in as like an honorable mention here, but Jalen Polk is a guy they drafted in the second round, and has made a lot of buzz in camp so far. This is a report. Jalen Polk is quickly turning into Mr. Reliable in the red zone. He has 2 touchdowns today in red zone drills, and he also went 3-1 in 1v1s versus the cornerbacks. He's steady and consistent every day. He's getting rave reviews. You have Drake May there. He could potentially lead this team in targets, and we don't know if he's good or not in the NFL. So that gives you some sneaky upside there, and he was somebody on reception perception. Shout out to Matt Harmon, who had an 81st percentile win rate against zone coverage, and even got a comparison from Matt Harmon to Robert Woods. Now, that doesn't scream league winner, but you could argue that Rashee Rice was in a similar role of a guy that was like low ADOT, just reliable, and I think Jalen Polk could give you the same thing and kind of be a PPR league winner down the stretch where he just racks up a bunch of catches. He's not going to give you like he's not going to break off a reception for 80 yards, but he is somebody that can rack up like 5 for 70 and a touchdown when you really need it down the stretch of a season. Now, another player on this New England team, I don't know why I said Zeke. Zeke is coming from New England. This is a weird way to do this, but Zeke is coming from New England. Then we have Jalen Polk in New England, and then we have Antonio Gibson here as my third sleeper out of New England. He's going 15th round on Underdog, 13th on Sleeper, and he is the guy who is replacing Zeke in New England, and he just has the perfect archetype of guys that we want on our bench that could be handcuffs, maybe carve out a role, because he is somebody who is 6'2", 220 pounds, runs a 4.4, started his first 2 seasons with over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, and he is also somebody, since getting drafted in 2020, is one of 13 running backs with over 200 targets. So he has size, speed, he's pretty decent in the red zone, and he can catch passes. That's really all I'm looking for here. This is somebody that could carve out a PPR role next to Ramondre Stevenson. I love Ramondre, but there is a chance that this team doesn't see him as a full-on 3-down back, and Antonio Gibson is annoying and is a thorn in the side of Ramondre for those 2-minute drills, 3rd down looks. So Antonio Gibson could be very much in the mix there. And then if Ramondre was to ever miss time, he is the standalone running back there on an offense that should feature their running backs. You have Alex Van Pelt. He's coming from the Cleveland Browns. He's been there since 2020. Of course, they've had Nick Chubb, so it's tough to really say, oh, well, his running game is good because they've had arguably the best pure rusher over the last 5 years, but it's a team that's going to feature their running backs, and we've also seen him bring in guys like Kareem Hunt to have a role alongside Nick Chubb. So I think Antonio Gibson can be that, and then also give you upside as a handcuff. Where if Ramondre was to go down, he gives you a top 15 every week starter in your RB2 spot. Now, our 4th sleeper, we are going to talk about a guy we've mentioned a bunch. I went on the Underdog Fantasy Show and I mentioned him there, but Pat Freiermuth. He's going in the 11th round on Underdog, 11th round on Sleeper, probably a little bit later than that on ESPN. And I would just erase his last year. They had Kenny Pickett at times. They had Mason Rudolph at times. He was also hurt. He missed 5 games last year. Just a really bad season. But his first 2 seasons were really good. And if you're in a spot where you miss out on the elite tight ends, I would just wait until you can get Pat Freiermuth and maybe pair him with a Brock Bowers or pair him with, you can go somebody else we're going to talk later on about it, like an upside swing at tight end. But he is, to me, the perfect, oh man, I don't have a tight end right now. Let's get Freiermuth in like round 10, 11, 12. And the reason for that is he has a very easy path to being a top 2 target on his team. This is a really good excerpt by Andrew Cooper here at Coupe Fiasco on Twitter. And pretty much what he found is that it is really difficult to finish as a top 5 tight end in a given season without being a top 2 target on your team. The only guys who haven't done that are Robert Tonyan and Martellus Bennett. Outside of that, if you want to be a top 5 tight end in fantasy football, you have to be a top 2 target earner on your team. And when we look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, you have George Pickens, who is the favorite to be the lead guy in targets. But then after that, it's Freiermuth. And then you're looking at like Van Jefferson, and you're looking at like Calvin Austin. Roman Wilson is already down with an injury. So to me, Freiermuth is the leader to lead this team in targets after George Pickens, and that's what we really want. And on top of that, small quarterback upgrade in Russell Wilson from Kenny Pickett, and Arthur Smith uses these tight ends. I understand that it was a shit show with Kyle Pitts. Like, I truly do understand that. It stung me a ton, but this is the kind of tight end that Arthur Smith really likes to use in his offense since 2021. In a tweet from John Macri here, Arthur Smith ranked 1st in tight end target rate, 3rd in inline target rate, and Freiermuth's inline target rate is 67.9%, Kyle Pitts 29.5%. So Pat Freiermuth is more of your traditional inline tight end next to the tackle that can go out there and be a traditional tight end, which is what Arthur Smith is looking for. So to me, he is a really, really good late round tight end option. Then our 5th must draft sleeper here. Let's talk Bucky Irving. He's pretty much free. 15th round on Underdog, 16th on Sleeper. You can get him in the last round of any home league. And I'm starting to come around on Rachaad White, but I do want to point out that when you're this inefficient as a rusher, 41st in elusiveness rating, 43rd in missed tackles forced per touch, 48th in yards after contact per touch. I think he didn't even crack 1,000 rushing yards despite having the second most carries in the NFL with 272. Very rarely is that then rewarded with the same volume or more volume. So there is going to be some opportunities on a team that's upgraded their offensive line, changed their offensive coordinator, so, there could be a new pecking order for a guy like Bucky Irving to come in and carve out a role. This is somebody that is undersized and didn't test super well, so he fell to day 3. But in terms of production and on-the-field explosiveness, he was very good. This is a tweet from Jacob Gibbs here, saying in 2023, Bucky Irving became just the second running back out of the past 10 draft classes to hit 50 or more receptions, 90-plus PFF rushing grade, and a 30% avoided tackle rate. So he can make people miss, he can give you explosive plays, he can catch passes, he can do it all. He's not going to be somebody that handles 25-plus touches, but he could very much be a guy who handles like 10 to 15 touches and is a real thorn in the, I know we said it with Ramondre, but a real thorn in the side to Rachaad White, and then has really, really high upside as just a standalone handcuff if Rachaad White was to go down. Now, I do want to cover a quarterback here who's going to be our 6th sleeper. And he is somebody who's going way later on ESPN, where he's like a 10th round pick on an Underdog, but he's somebody going in the, like 130s on ESPN. He's buried there. So if you miss out on Kyler or Dak Prescott or Joe Burrow, I'm waiting till Caleb Williams, who I think could be an absolute stud this year. You have to understand that rookie quarterbacks have actually been pretty decent in years past, where CJ Stroud was pretty damn good last year. Before that, we've had RG3, Justin Herbert, Cam Newton, Deshaun Watson. I know it's like, oh, well, we can't project him at a ceiling. Well, you're getting him super late. And if you just think back, Caleb Williams is not only talked about as like the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck, but he's also talked about that he has a wide receiver room right now that maybe no rookie quarterback has ever had. Keenan Allen, really good. DJ Moore, really good. Rome Odunze, top 10 draft capital wide receiver. He is going to, on day 1, potentially have the best 3 wide receiver set in all of football. That's his ceiling. To use those guys, the after the catch efficiency of those guys, the offensive efficiency of them actually getting in the red zone and scoring points. Right now, Vegas has them projected for the 16th most points in the NFL, which is actually pretty damn good. And then on top of that, he also has the floor where you can see as well on this list of like the 17-plus point per game guys of Dak and Kyler and Mariota and Russell Wilson. All of these guys were in their rookie years. 17-plus points per game is still a guy you can stream on a weekly basis. Now, I will say I would definitely pair him with your, whoever's like the boring quarterback you like between Stafford, Rodgers, Goff, Tua. I even like Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, all of those guys you can get late. I would definitely draft 2 quarterbacks with Caleb, but the upside is absolutely there. They brought in Shane Waldron, who has had a pretty damn good offense with Seattle the last 3 years, where over that stretch they were 10th in offensive efficiency, 7th in rushing efficiency, 12th in passing efficiency, 10th in neutral pass rate, tied for 5th in pace. So they're going to be up-tempo, passing the ball, scoring points, and the biggest upside point with Caleb Williams that I think is really understated is his rushing upside. He is somebody that had double-digit rushing touchdowns in each of his final 2 years in college. And on top of that, it's not like Chicago has a great goal line back. DeAndre Swift isn't a great goal line back. Khalil Herbert's a little bit undersized. I guess they have Roshan Johnson, but he's seen as more of a pass-catching back. So if they get in close in the red zone and Caleb Williams can get some zone reads going or QB sneaks just to punch it in, we're talking about a guy who could, crush this year. Again, like he could have a CJ Stroud passing season and then also give you 10 rushing touchdowns on the ground. I think that is truly in his range. Now, speaking of Chicago, we have Khalil Herbert, who is free wherever you're drafting. He's the perfect bottom of the bench stash. And this is a running back who's actually really good. He's just been slept on. We look at rushing efficiency over the last 2 years. Shout out to @fball_insights on Twitter. Missed tackles forced per carry, and then you have yards after contact per carry. He is in that top right, in that range of Chubb, Jalen Warren, Breece Hall. That's a really good group to be with. And then the red arrow is where DeAndre Swift has ranked over the last 2 years. He has not been all that efficient. Roshan Johnson is a pretty big mystery box. So Khalil Herbert could be in an offense that's ascending under Caleb Williams and carve out a role as the lead back over DeAndre Swift. That's not going to happen right away because DeAndre Swift was paid so much money, but we've seen coaching staff sour on DeAndre Swift. We saw the Eagles last year sour on him a little bit, where they started like involving Kenneth Gainwell. We saw in Detroit at like the back half of his career. I think that they were throwing out there the kid from the Chargers. I can't remember his name, but he I think it was like Northwestern. It was the guy who was behind Austin Eckler, kind of the Austin Eckler clone, just like completely shutting down DeAndre Swift in 2022, I believe that was. So I don't know. He could easily fall out of favor. Khalil Herbert could end up being the lead back. DeAndre Swift could get hurt. And you even have like a sliver of upside. I don't think this is going to happen, but it's at least worth mentioning. It's a tweet by Adam Levitan. The Athletic continues to suggest that Khalil Herbert isn't a lock for the final roster. And if that happens, he could get picked up by one of these RB-needy teams. He could go to the Chargers. He could go to the Cowboys. We could see an injury happen this offseason. We wouldn't like to see that, but there could be an injury here in the next few weeks, and then Khalil Herbert gets traded or he gets cut and then he gets signed there. So there's some other outs too. And then it's also a thing where if he gets cut and like not picked up by a good team, you can just cut him and he could be the first guy off your roster as you grab somebody else off of waivers. Then we have Josh Downs, who isn't a rookie wide receiver, but he's someone I'm really growing on. I've been very crucial of him in terms of his yards per out run and the numbers he put out on the rookie wide receiver report, but it's worth mentioning that there is some context I've been missing where he did have a week 9 knee injury. And what that did is after that, his targets per out run, his first downs per out run, his yards per out run all went down. And before then, he was actually looking really good. Over 20% targets per out run, 1.8 yards per out run, and he was really hitting his stride with Gardner Minshew. It's just that he got hurt. And when we look even deeper, his reception perception is crazy. 93rd percentile versus man coverage, 82nd percentile versus zone. He is mainly a slot guy, but he has that year 2 breakout upside, and he even has some upside to be out there in 2 wide receiver sets. I wouldn't bet on it, but a guy like Steichen's going to use a lot more 3 wide receiver sets than a usual kind of like boomer type of head coach. But we do have this. We have some bad reports on A.D. Mitchell, which I hate to see because I actually like A.D. Mitchell a ton, but Davis Maddock pointed it out. Pretty much Mitchell has not been the same playmaker he was during the spring when the rookie seemingly made a noteworthy catch every practice. He had some moments throughout one-on-one drills, but the second-round pick has been relatively quiet. And then pretty much as it stands now, however, Pierce remains firmly in place as the Colts' 3rd starting receiver. So that means Downs is at 2, Pierce at 3, A.D. Mitchell behind that. So Downs is going to have all the opportunity in the world to succeed here. And I understand that it's going to be a run-heavy offense, but Steichen was top 5 in pace of play and no huddle rate last year. So they're going to have a low pass rate, but a high play rate, if that makes sense. So there still should be some passing volume there. And you get the upside that, what if Anthony Richardson is actually a really good quarterback? Then we have Xavier Legette, who I also think has some passing offense upside here with Dave Canales and Bryce Young, where if we look at what Dave Canales has done at each one of these stops, Geno Smith, better adjusted net yards per attempt. Same thing for Baker. Could that be what we see with Bryce Young this season? So there is some upside for this passing offense to be a bounce back where it's not, league worst and it's league average. And that's huge because after Deontay Johnson, there's a lot of meat on the bone for a first-round rookie wide receiver in Xavier Legette. Now, disclaimer, I'm going to show a screenshot here. I am not saying Xavier Legette is the next Julio Jones. I am just outlining the kind of physical specimen that he is. 6'1", 220 pounds, 4.39 speed, 40-inch vertical, bonkers stuff. Looks similar to Julio Jones as an athlete. Obviously not as a player. Julio Jones is just a different breed, but he has that same physical specimen type of archetype. He is someone that did not break out as a freshman at Alabama like Julio Jones. He was a fifth-year breakout at South Carolina, which is a little bit of an issue, but we at least saw a true ceiling there. It's not like it was like a baby breakout. He had 71 catches, 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns on over 3 yards per out run, and was an absolute monster. He's someone that can win down the field. He's someone that can get screen game work, carries. They want to involve him everywhere, and pretty much the only player he has to beat to get on the field is a guy like Adam Thielen. So he is somebody that I think has a lot of rookie upside down the stretch of this season. And our final player here is Greg Dulcich. Now, this is a last-round pick, and this is somebody I would pair, again, with like a Pat Freiermuth. And if you can't get Freiermuth in like a Hunter Henry, Tyler Conklin type late in your draft as just an upside swing, we talked about it earlier. We want a tight end that can be a top 2 target earner on their team. And we look at the Broncos, the wide receiver depth chart is brutal. Liam Murphy is out there. He won BBM 2. He has been scouting the Broncos beat here. And right now you have Troy Franklin running behind Lil Jordan Humphrey And your wide receiver depth chart is Sutton, and then it's Josh Reynolds, then Marvin Mims, then Tim Patrick, little Jordan Humphrey, then Troy Franklin. So Greg Dulcich, outside of Cortland Sutton, there's not a ton there in terms of what he's competing with. And this is a guy in Greg Dulcich who lost last year due to injury, but before that had a really strong rookie year, where if we look at tight ends since 2000 to hit 40-plus receiving yards per game, he is one of 8 guys in a really good list of Kyle Pitts, Jeremy Shockey, Jordan Reed, Sam Laporta, Evan Ingram, Dalton Kincaid, and Aaron Hernandez. He's also a guy who has a really high ADOT, so he's going to give you a lot of per-target efficiency because he's getting those catches downfield. So, look, it's not the sexiest passing offense in the world. He has a rookie quarterback. There's a lot of things that could go wrong, but as like a last-round upside swing at tight end, I do really like Greg Dulcich. Now, as always, I'm going to have those sleepers highlighted on my rankings. You can find those over at patreon.com, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I have my rankings. It's a cheat sheet with a checklist of all these players. It's tiered. It has all of my targets highlighted, and it has the ideal round I would draft these players in also outlined there. So you can kind of know where I want to take these players, how I have them ranked, the tier breaks, all of that good stuff. But if you can't support me there, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like